Hello, welcome to the Good Morning Seniors YouTube channel. Today's podcast topic name is Don't Say These 5 Phrases to Your Kids After 65. Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today, well, it's really focused. We're diving into one of the most vital relationships, but also, let's be honest, sometimes one of the trickiest. The one between a senior parent, say 65 and up, and their adult children. We've gathered some really powerful advice today. The aim is to help build bridges, not walls, especially in this really important stage of life. And we're not just going to list things you shouldn't say. We want to get into the why. Why do certain words cause damage? And how can a bit of self-reflection maybe unlock richer, better connections?
Exactly. And this kind of knowledge, it's incredibly important for vitality. Life after 65 should be a really vibrant chapter. It should be full of connection, peace, but sometimes unintentional words, maybe words coming from loneliness or thinking about the past. They can create distance. Sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly. And we know that strong bonds with adult kids, they aren't just, a nice little extra. They're absolutely vital for emotional support, for motivation, that sense of purpose that keeps us all engaged, especially when life throws curveballs.
That's a great distinction. Not just nice to have, but vital. And the stakes here, they feel pretty high. We're talking about potentially preventing some really deep emotional rifts.
Oh, absolutely. It's much more than just minor family squabbles. Think about this. There's data showing that actual estrangement, affects roughly 27% of Americans.
27%, wow.
Yes, that's more than 1 in 4 families dealing with a really severe communication breakdown.
That's staggering. It really underscores how serious this can get.
It does. It shows why, working to prevent that kind of erosion in family ties at this stage, it might just be the most critical communication challenge seniors face.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We have a clear plan today. We're going to look closely at 5 common phrases. We'll analyze, the psychology behind why they sting so much. And crucially, we'll offer some concrete tips, motivational ideas, and positive alternatives, all drawn from real life experiences right here in the U.S. By the end of this deep dive, the goal is for you, the listener, to feel better equipped to build those deeper, maybe more guilt-free connections. Right, let's dive into the first one. This is a biggie. It often slips out maybe when a parent is feeling that sharp edge of loneliness, perhaps after retirement or a big life change. It's, you never have time for me anymore. It sounds like just expressing sadness, right? But can you unpack why this so often lands like a guilt trip for the adult child?
Yeah, it's fascinating, the psychology here. You could almost call it a demand for emotional labor hidden inside a complaint. The parent is trying to say, I need connection. But the way it's said, it immediately puts the focus on blame, on the child's failure.
So it's accusation, not vulnerability.
Precisely. And the adult child, who's probably already juggling a million things, hears you're selfish or you don't care enough, instead of the real message, I miss you. And that, it instantly puts them on the defensive. They feel anxious, pressured.
Yeah, I think anyone listening who's, in their 40s, 50s, maybe 60s, they know that feeling. Pulled in so many directions. Work, kids, maybe aging parents themselves. The last thing you want is a call that feels like another chore you're failing at.
That's a critical point. The phrase just ignores the reality of their lives. They are busy, careers, their own families, finances, social stuff. It's a lot. So when they hear that accusation, it feels like none of their effort is seen or appreciated. And over time, that feeling of being constantly accused, even if they are genuinely busy, it makes them pull back. Psychologically, anyway.
So they start associating calls or visits with stress. Dread.
Exactly. That interaction becomes linked with negative feelings, which is the opposite of what the parent wants, right? This kind of guilt-based communication, it just erodes trust, it ruins closeness, it's completely counterproductive.
So the long-term effect, the child might start screening calls or putting off visits just to avoid that heavy feeling.
That's spot on. The relationship shifts, you see, from something desirable, something voluntary, to this taxing obligation, heavy with emotional baggage. But if you can manage to eliminate that phrasing, the change can be really significant. You move away from that adversarial dynamic towards mutual respect. When the adult child feels appreciated, not accused, they're much more likely to want to check in voluntarily, and that dramatically lowers the risk of drifting apart or even estrangement.
So you actually get better interactions, more quality time, precisely because it isn't forced.
Absolutely. The benefits are huge. You get higher quality visits because they want to be there. You foster better understanding, more empathy for their world, and maybe most importantly, you keep those bonds strong for the long haul. For when you might really need that support, like during a health issue or a tough transition, If the relationship is built on respect, they show up because they care, not because they feel guilty.
Okay, let's make this really actionable. How does the senior actually do this? How do they fight that underlying feeling, maybe of dependency, that often fuels this kind of phrase?
Well, it really has to start with a mindset shift, a big one. The parent needs to try and see the child's busyness, not as a personal rejection, but maybe as proof of successful parenting. You raised an independent, capable adult. That's the success story you helped create.
That's a powerful reframe.
It is. And to tackle that feeling of dependency, which often is the root cause, seniors really need to invest in their own lives. Find fulfillment outside that relationship. We often recommend specific things like commit to a replacement activity, enroll in a class, volunteer somewhere twice a week, join a new club, something that builds your own world. When you feel fulfilled yourself, you're less likely to lean so heavily on your kids to fill that emotional space.
Focus on your own fulfillment, not demanding it from them. Makes sense.
Right. And then there are the actionable strategies for communication itself. Change the language. Maybe start calls with something positive, like, I really enjoyed our last chat. But the key tool is the non-blaming I statement. Instead of accusation, make it an invitation. And crucially, show you respect their schedule.
Can you give us some specific examples? What does that sound like in practice? Positive alternatives that feel warm, but not like a demand.
Sure. Instead of, you never have time, you could try something like, I'd love to connect soon when your schedule opens up. I miss our talks, but I know things are hectic for you. See? It's warm, it shows understanding. Or you could shift the focus entirely. I was just telling my friends mention something positive about their life. How's your week looking? Any chance for a quick catch-up call? It expresses interest, affection, but respects their limits.
That example of Mary from Chicago really brings this to life. Can you tell us a bit more about how she made that change?
Yeah, Mary's story is quite telling. She's 68 in Chicago. After her husband passed away, she really struggled. And her go-to phrase with her son, who's a very busy lawyer, was exactly that guilt-inducing one. It led to really tense calls, obligatory check-ins. The distance was growing. But through some self-reflection, Mary realized she was essentially blaming him for her loneliness. So the operational change was key. She started sending short texts, things that didn't demand an immediate response, like thinking of you or loved that picture you sent. When she did want to talk, she'd phrase it as an open invitation. She had to kind of push through that initial silence. You know, when you stop pressuring someone, there can be a pause. But she stuck with it. And now they have weekly video chats. She realized that avoiding the blame actually brought them much closer. Her calls became a source of pleasure for him, not dread.
That's a fantastic outcome. And John in Austin, his story shows it's possible even after things have gotten pretty strained.
Definitely. John, 72, from Austin. He shared that he'd used that phrase a lot with his daughter, who's a teacher. It contributed to about a year where they had very minimal contact, especially during a stressful time for her. When he decided he wanted to fix things, he didn't just stop using the phrase. He actually apologized. Specifically for the tone he'd taken, that feeling he gave her that she was constantly letting him down. He then focused only on supportive words, asking about her needs, her stress, and now. They enjoy monthly dinners together. It's a real testament that love and support achieve what guilt never can.
Okay, that naturally leads us to the second phrase, also rooted in obligation, maybe even more directly. It's the classic, after everything I've done for you. This one feels like it comes up when a parent feels unappreciated, maybe? But why does reminding adult kids of past sacrifices backfire so consistently, so dramatically?
Oh, this one is. It's tough. Because it fundamentally tries to redefine the parent-child relationship right when it needs to be evolving into an adult dynamic. Psychologists sometimes call it martyrdom parenting. Look, the parent might have genuinely sacrificed a lot. We know that. But phrasing it this way turns parenting into a transaction. It implies the child owes a debt they have to keep repaying with time, attention, maybe obedience.
And it just strips away that idea of unconditional love, doesn't it?
Completely. The child doesn't feel loved freely, they feel indebted. And who wants to be in perpetual debt?
So the child pulls back. Not because they don't love the parent, necessarily, but to escape that constant feeling of owing something they can never truly repay.
That's exactly it. They're escaping the weight of that obligation. It feels like emotional blackmail, frankly. And it creates really toxic patterns. If the child feels perpetually burdened, unwillingly bonded, they feel like nothing they do is ever enough to settle the score. And that just breeds resentment, deep resentment, which eventually leads to wanting distance, sometimes even estrangement.
So the turnaround here, it has to be about shifting from this debt economy to more of an economy of grace. How does dropping this phrase actually build stronger bonds?
Well, when you remove that expectation of repayment, you make space for genuine, unconditional love to flow. Both ways. It actually encourages adult children to give their time and support freely because they want to connect with you, celebrate you, not because they're afraid of your disappointment or anger. You get interactions that are freer, more genuine. There's mutual appreciation, less simmering resentment, and you're building a positive legacy, really. A legacy of emotional freedom, which benefits the whole family, even future generations.
Okay, let's talk about the motivation needed for this shift. This can be hard. How can seniors reframe maybe decades of sacrifice without feeling like all that effort was just ignored or unappreciated?
It's a very real challenge. The shift has to be internal first, deeply affirming for the parent themselves. They need to reframe those sacrifices, not as debts incurred by the child, but as choices they made out of love. And then celebrate their parenting role based on the outcome, not on repayment. A key strategy might be, say, journaling. Writing down gratitude for their kids' current successes and maybe connecting that success back to their own efforts as a source of pride, not debt. They might need affirmations. Things like, I raised independent, capable kids. That's my success story. That is the reward. The focus absolutely has to be on the present, complementing current achievements without ever linking it back to past support or implied debt.
So validate your past efforts internally maybe, but don't weaponize them in present conversations.
Exactly. If you need to acknowledge the sacrifice, do it privately or maybe with a peer, focusing on your own strength and choices, not on what the child owes you. And the alternatives you use in conversation have to affirm the child without creating any sense of obligation.
Okay, give us those powerful, positive alternatives. What can they say instead?
Well, instead of calling in the debt, you frame their success as a shared joy. Something like, I'm just so proud of the person you've become. It's genuinely rewarding for me to see you thrive. Or you could acknowledge your past support lightly without demanding repayment. I really loved being able to support you back then. Tell me about your latest wins. You've always had such drive. See how that keeps it forward-looking. It celebrates their autonomy, their current life.
Virginia's story from New York sounds like a really tough but ultimately hopeful example of this.
It is. Virginia, 70 years old. She actually became estranged from all 4 of her children. And she acknowledged that her frequent use of this specific phrase, especially during disagreements, was a major factor. Her kids consistently said they felt manipulated, like she was using past sacrifices to win arguments or demand compliance now. It led to a complete communication breakdown. What motivated her to change was the sheer pain of that separation. She did some serious self-reflection. She reached out and genuinely apologized, not just for the words, but for making them feel indebted. She made a conscious commitment to let go of that whole concept of repayment. 2 of her children have since reconciled with her. She gets to enjoy holidays with them now. She understands that releasing that idea of emotional debt was absolutely the key to any healing.
Wow, and Susan Harf in Florida, the life coach you mentioned, her experience echoes this.
Yes, Susan Harf, 67. She shared her own journey of rebuilding bonds after years where these kinds of guilt-heavy conversations had created distance with her own kids. She realized that shifting completely to appreciative language, focusing on pride in their present lives, offering support without strings attached, rather than dwelling on past obligations, that was fundamental to rebuilding those connections. She now collaborates with her adult kids on family projects, which is a lovely outcome. It really shows how words can wound, but they can also mend. And that mending often requires letting go of that debt mentality unconditionally.
All right, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about guilt and obligation. Now let's move into judgment. This introduces a different kind of barrier, maybe sharper. Phrase number 3 hits a really common pressure point, especially for seniors maybe eager for new family roles, like becoming grandparents. It's, when are you going to settle down? Give me grandchildren. We know often this comes from a place of genuine love, excitement for the future. But why is this constant questioning so invasive? Why does it tend to push adult children away?
This one is tricky because the intention might feel positive to the parent, but the impact is often negative. It's problematic because it's tied up in, well, external validation and a desire for control over the child's life path. Whether intended or not, it sends a message. Your current life, your career, your travel, your singlehood, whatever it is, it's somehow wrong or incomplete. Until you meet my expectations, my timeline for your life, it dismisses their choices, their pace. And often their place is dictated by really complex, real-world factors. Financial stability, career timing, maybe health issues, or even very private struggles like infertility that the parent might not even know about.
So instead of feeling encouraged in their current life, they hear, you're failing, you're not meeting the benchmark.
It invalidates whatever happiness or fulfillment they do have right now.
Absolutely. And the natural reaction to feeling judged like that, defensiveness, intense defensiveness. When adult kids feel constantly pressured about these huge life milestones, marriage, kids, they start to withdraw emotionally. They just stop sharing personal stuff. Why would they? They fear any update will just be met with more criticism or twisted back to the when you going to question, and that leads directly to distance. The bonds become superficial, filtered.
It's interesting because for some seniors, their own sense of identity, their social role, might feel tied up in becoming a grandparent. It's a real, genuine yearning. How do they balance that personal desire without it becoming this crushing pressure on their child?
That's a vital question. And it requires real internal work from the parent. They need to internalize that their main motivation has to be the child's happiness and their right to choose their own path, not fulfilling the parent's identity needs on the parent's schedule. The balance comes from accepting the child's life as theirs. The parent's yearning for that future role. It needs to be channeled into their own fulfillment, their own life. A core strategy is investing heavily in having a vibrant, interesting life now. Hobbies, volunteering, travel, friendships. They need to almost adopt a mantra, their life, their choices. Accepting the child's current reality is the absolute key to managing that internal eagerness without damaging the relationship.
And what does the communication look like when it is genuinely supportive, not pressuring? How do you show interest without judging?
It's about asking genuinely open-ended questions. Questions that celebrate who they are now. Show curiosity about their journey, not just the destination you want for them. So instead of focusing on the milestone, ask things like, what's really exciting you in your career right now? Or tell me about your latest adventures. What's bringing you joy? You can share your own experiences, sure, but without attaching an expectation, when I was your age, can be fine as long as it doesn't end with, you should be doing X. It requires patience, acceptance, active self-reflection.
The alternatives need to be really clear on that validation point then.
Oh, definitely. Unconditional validation is powerful. You could say something like, I'm just excited for whatever path you choose, at whatever pace feels right for you. Your happiness is honestly the main thing I care about. That's a really strong message. Or even simpler, you're building such a unique and interesting life for yourself. Tell me more about what inspires you these days.
We've got a couple of examples here that show just how damaging this pressure can be. The first one involved a daughter focused on her career in California.
Yes, that was a case where a daughter actually became estranged from her 66-year-old mother. The constant pressure about settling down, finding a partner, it happened while the daughter was pouring everything into a demanding career. The daughter just felt perpetually judged, like her professional ambition wasn't serious enough compared to finding a husband. It led to a period of no contact at all. Reconciliation only happened after the mother, really motivated by the pain of that silence, offered a sincere apology. And crucially, she shifted her focus. She started actively supporting her daughter's current professional goals, not asking about future personal ones. The mother learned that celebrating the path someone is on is way more important than insisting on the path you wish they were on.
That's a big lesson. And the example from Texas involving private struggles.
Yeah.
And that really highlights the need for sensitivity, doesn't it?
It really does. In that case, a 69-year-old father caused estrangement with his son through relentless nagging about grandchildren. What the father didn't know, or maybe hadn't created the safe space to be told, was that his son and partner were privately struggling with infertility. So every time the father brought it up, it wasn't just annoying, it was deeply painful. It created intense shame and resentment during an already incredibly stressful time. The father only managed to rebuild that relationship after he took the time to really educate himself about estrangement. He read books, he reflected, he realized his questions weren't coming across as loving interest, but as painful attacks given their private situation. He learned that respecting privacy, showing unconditional patience, that's what ultimately allowed them to reconnect.
Well, sensitivity is key. Okay, let's move to phrase number 4. This one shifts from future judgment to maybe weaponizing past knowledge. It's the infamous, I told you so. The ultimate smug phrase, right? Even if the parent was right, even if they did warn the child about something, why is saying this so incredibly damaging to the adult bond?
This one, it's lethal to vulnerability. Because saying, I told you so, isn't really about helping someone learn from a mistake. It's almost entirely about claiming superiority, about asserting that parent knows best dynamic long after it should have evolved. It just highlights the adult child's failure. It makes them feel shamed, belittled, maybe even stupid. And when people feel shamed after making a mistake, what do they learn?
They learn to hide their mistakes next time.
Exactly. Hide your failures, hide your struggles. Don't be vulnerable with this person because they'll use it to make you feel bad.
And if they're hiding failures, the bond becomes superficial. You're only getting the highlight reel, not the real person.
Precisely. The relationship stops being a safe emotional space. The child will only share the wins or heavily edited versions of reality. The parent never gets true insight into their life, their challenges. The adult child might lose confidence in their own judgment too. It just creates distance, superficiality.
So the antidote here must be empathy. How does shifting to empathy change this dynamic? How does it strengthen the bond instead of weakening it?
Empathy is everything here. It transforms the parent's role instantly, from critic, from judge, to ally, and that immediately creates a safe space, a non-judgmental zone where sharing is possible. It actually strengthens everyone's emotional intelligence. The parent learns humility, understanding. The child learns they can process failure without facing retribution or shame from the parent. This mutual learning, it's invaluable. It prevents defensiveness, leads to much deeper, more honest conversations.
Okay, but that impulse.
That's it.
See, I knew
But
it.
it's false.
It's strong. It's human. What are the practical tips for self-regulation? How do you bite your tongue?
Self-regulation is absolutely key. The first piece of advice sounds simple, but it's crucial. Practice the pause. Someone tells you about a mistake, especially one you predicted. Count to 10, breathe, before you say anything. That pause creates a vital space between the stimulus, the bad news, and your reaction, the smug phrase, and the motivation. The parent needs to try and view mistakes not as failures to be punished, but as essential opportunities for growth, for the child and for the relationship. Maybe use an internal affirmation like, "My child is learning. I'm here to support, not to judge." Beyond the pause, really focus on active listening. Listen to understand their experience, not just to find the "I told you so" moment.
And we need to be clear about the difference between support and enabling, right?
Yeah.
Especially when a mistake has real consequences.
Yes, that's a critical distinction in adult relationships. Support means being there emotionally, helping them process the failure, talk through the feelings, maybe explore lessons learned together. It's about offering solidarity. Enabling is different. Enabling is jumping in to fix the consequence before the adult child has had a chance to grapple with it themselves, paying off the debt immediately, smoothing over the conflict with someone else. That prevents them from fully learning and taking responsibility. A truly supportive parent offers emotional resources, companionship through the difficulty. They don't try to erase the mistake or prevent the discomfort that often comes with learning.
So what are the best alternatives? What can you say instead of "I told you so" that leads with compassion, maybe curiosity?
You have to lead with genuine compassion. Try something like, "Oh, that sounds really tough. That must feel difficult. What can we learn from this?" That shifts it to resilience, growth, not blame. Or the simple, powerful, unconditional affirmation, "I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together no matter what." That conveys support without any judgment.
The power of humility really comes through in those real-life stories, like the mom in Michigan.
Right. This was a 71-year-old mother. She shared that she used "I told you so" after her son's painful divorce. It just added another layer of pain to an already devastating situation, and it significantly worsened their estrangement. She came to realize that her need to be right was far less important than his need for comfort and support. Her path to reconciliation involved not just stopping the phrase, but actively reaching out, validating his pain without offering solutions or judgment, just being there. She modeled humility. She put his emotional needs ahead of her ego, and they reconciled because the relationship shifted. It went from critical to compassionate.
And Virginia, who we heard about earlier with the "after everything I've done" phrase, she learned this lesson too in a different context.
Yes, Virginia, 70 years old again. She recognized that her use of "I told you so," especially about her children's career choices or financial decisions, had really pushed them away. She realized that being right in the moment was creating huge distance in the long run. When she decided to change her communication, letting go of that ego, embracing empathy, just listening without judgment, that's when trust started to rebuild. That's when closeness returned. The consistent takeaway is humility heals the damage that superiority causes.
Okay, we've reached our fifth and final phrase. And this one. Maybe it causes the most deep-seated, long-lasting family damage. It's, why can't you be more like your sibling? Ugh. Why are comparisons like this the ultimate relationship pitfall? Even if the parent genuinely thinks they're motivating one child by, praising the perceived success of another.
Comparisons are just devastating Because they're inherently divisive. They create a kind of zero-sum game within the family unit itself. They breed rivalry. They can dig up old sibling wounds, things that might have been buried for decades. And fundamentally, this phrase pits family members against each other. It severely erodes the individual child's self-worth, the one being compared negatively. And it undermines the unity of the entire family. Think about it. When a parent praises, say, the high-achieving doctor sibling, but uses that praise to implicitly or explicitly criticize the sibling who's maybe a struggling artist, what happens? The artist doesn't suddenly think, oh, I should be a doctor. No, they just feel resentful. Resentful of the doctor sibling and resentful of the parent.
And it doesn't just damage the relationship with the parent, right? It puts a huge strain on the relationship between the siblings themselves, potentially for their entire lives.
Absolutely. The parent's words can become the source of lifelong jealousy, resentment, a permanent feeling of inadequacy within the family structure. The goal is connection, right? But comparisons achieve the absolute opposite. They isolate. By consciously choosing to celebrate each child's uniqueness instead, you actively foster harmony. You create psychological safety for everyone.
What are the specific benefits, then, of deliberately avoiding this comparison trap? What does the family gain?
Oh, the gains are profound for family harmony. When a parent makes a point of celebrating what makes each child unique, they boost that child's individual self-esteem. They feel seen and valued for who they are, not for how they measure up against someone else. This naturally leads to deeper, more authentic connections. The child knows they're loved for their intrinsic qualities, their unique contribution, not just for hitting some external benchmark set by a sibling's success. And think about family gatherings. When comparison isn't hanging in the air, you get much more positive vibes, less jealousy, less defensiveness, a genuinely harmonious atmosphere. That's priceless, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
But how do you motivate a parent to appreciate those differences? Especially when, let's face it, society often has clear markers for success that might naturally lead to a bias towards one child. It can create that golden child dynamic.
That golden child dynamic, it's toxic for everyone involved. The parent has to recognize that. The supposedly golden child often carries this immense pressure to maintain perfection, which is exhausting and isolating in its own way. And the other child, of course, carries the burden of feeling inadequate. So the strategy to avoid this has to be active, conscious. The senior parent needs to make a real effort to appreciate the differences in each child. Maybe adopt a mantra like, each of my children shines in their own unique way, and that's what makes our family interesting and whole. It requires deep self-reflection from the parent, too, about their own biases. Did they always value, say, financial security over creative risk-taking? If so, they need to consciously work to recalibrate that. Make an effort to see and value different kinds of strengths, and then actively highlight specific, unique strengths for each child. If one is known for their deep compassion, celebrate that. If the other is known for their incredible problem-solving skills, celebrate that equally. Never use one sibling's strength as a measuring stick to judge the other.
So the alternatives need to focus squarely on individual affirmation, validating their distinct paths, their distinct qualities.
Exactly. Focus on celebrating their individual journey. You could say something like, I really love how you're carving out your own unique path in the world. That takes real courage and vision. That validates their autonomy, their uniqueness, or a direct compliment focusing on their character. Your specific talents, like your creativity, your resilience, your kindness, they honestly amaze me. I'm just so proud of the person you are. It's all about specific, non-comparative, non-judgmental praise tailored to that individual.
The Seattle family example you mentioned, it sounds like it vividly shows the ripple effect of comparisons across the whole family.
Yes, this was a painful story, often discussed in family counseling contexts. It involved a 67-year-old parent in Seattle. Their habit of making comparisons, sometimes subtle, sometimes overt, led directly to deep rifts between the siblings, and eventually estrangement from several family members who just felt constantly overlooked or criticized. The whole family atmosphere was described as perpetually tense. What motivated the parent to change was, again, the immense pain of that disconnection. They made a firm commitment to stop all comparisons, completely. The healing process involved the parent reaching out to each child individually, acknowledging their unique struggles, celebrating their unique successes, without ever mentioning the other sibling in that context. When the parent shifted to that focused individual support and stopped framing differences as deficits, slowly, gradually, the family began to heal. They started rebuilding that sense of unity.
And Susan Harf, the coach from Florida, her experience backs this up too.
Yes, her professional work and her personal journey both confirmed that comparison was one of the major drivers of alienation she experienced with her own children earlier on. She recognized that changing her dialogue, shifting it entirely towards praise for individual qualities and appreciation for their distinct paths, was absolutely fundamental to rebuilding those bonds. These stories from different parts of the U.S., they all point to the same truth. Celebrating uniqueness unites families. Comparison. It divides. It isolates. #, synthesis and conclusion. So if we bring these 5 phrases together, you never have time for me anymore after everything I've done for you. When are you going to settle down? Give me grandchildren. I told you so. And why can't you be more like your sibling? What do they all have in common? Well, they all share these really powerful, destructive underlying themes. They're all, in different ways, attempts to control the adult child. Control their behavior, their time, their life choices, even how they feel about themselves. They rely on guilt, implying emotional debt. They carry heavy judgment. Or they belittle the adult child experience or capabilities.
And what's the core psychological problem that links them all, would you say? Why do they push people away instead of bringing them closer?
At their heart, they replace genuine, unconditional connection with something else. Either a feeling of duty, an obligation born of guilt, or a feeling of inadequacy, of not measuring up. The parent might want connection, but the method they're using, manipulation, judgment, comparison, actively prevents it. The adult child isn't pulling away from love, usually. They're pulling away from the emotional pain that gets triggered by these kinds of interactions. The core realization, I think, for the senior parent is that the relationship has to evolve. It can't stay in that old parental hierarchy mode where the parent guides and judges. It needs to become more of an adult-to-adult partnership based on mutual respect, mutual regard. That's the currency that works now.
And that core motivation for change. We've seen it threaded through all these stories we discussed from different places, different families. Mary in Chicago taking practical steps for her own life. The father in Texas learning humility about things he didn't understand. It shows that change is possible. And it's profoundly rewarding when it happens. Words just hold immense power, don't they? Especially maybe after 65. They can either draw our loved ones closer or they can create these painful, sometimes permanent gaps.
Absolutely. And that brings us, I think, to our final thought for you, the listener. A bit of a provocation, maybe. We've talked about 5 specific phrases to avoid. We've offered alternatives, talked about the mindset shifts, the operational steps to make those changes stick. That's all crucial. But the real ongoing challenge, the deeper work perhaps, isn't just stopping yourself from saying those specific words. It's about the self-growth needed to address the underlying feelings that make you want to say them in the first place. Those feelings of maybe deep-seated dependency, fear of becoming irrelevant, a desire for control that's no longer appropriate, unconscious judgments you hold. Doing that ongoing self-reflection, asking why those sentiments bubble up for you, that is the true foundation. That's what really builds a fuller, more joy-filled, and deeply connected life with your family in the long run.
That's a profound challenge, definitely. Requires humility, sustained effort, but as you say, the reward is connection, harmony. Priceless, really, in this chapter of life. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into healthy communication after 65. We hope you found these insights valuable. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.